Dave. So what was it that spurred your interest into looking into personality types and archetypes, the spiral, all that nonsense?
There a lot. So I worked in the industry for a long time, and what the main goal for a long time was to see how quick it was until I could make someone spew. This is the correct technique for a squat. Squats are bad for your knees. It was also in there among many other things that bro science has since debunked, and proper science. So that was the initial, and then it took me a while to go, well, hang on a sec, each person, it wasn't like each person is unique and different, it's just like how I talk to this person, how I talk to that person is different. Why is that the case? Why does this person respond differently? And it started out just by going, initially like what cues, so I have to use this cue for this type of person, then this cue for this person, and why is that? That was sort of where my curiosity started, and I noticed that, and so I started to look into adapting my teaching style and just sort of stabbing in the dark at people's learning style. Later on I learned there is no such thing as a learning style. People can learn through all different senses, really. It's more so they have a preference, and the preference can be like, it can depend upon so many different factors. So it's like if somebody was a visual learner but they lost their sight, they can still learn, right? They can learn in other ways, and in fact the other senses have to be improved anyway. It's just a matter of, like, I started to pick up on people's language. They're like, I just can't picture myself doing that, and you're like, right, okay, so you probably need a visual cue of some sort, and it's like, would you like me to film it? And so their response was quite obvious. Later on, learning things like eye accessing cues, and so an easy one is like if you're asking somebody a question or you're explaining something and they can't, they're looking up and they're like not really figuring it out, you would then say to them, would you like me to draw it? And they're like, yeah, that'd be really good. And so that's sort of where it started. I listened to old mate Tony Robbins, like fucking, what am I, 29, 10 years ago.
It's a good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I was 19 at the time. I'm like, oh, this stuff's really good. And I thought it was really good because it opened up my thinking on so many different levels.
Yeah.
And then my boss just kind of berated it, made fun of it. My housemate, who was 10 years older than me in the same industry, I was like, oh, you should listen to these CDs. And he was like, no, I don't need to listen to that shit, man. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I don't know any of this stuff, right?
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Yeah. I'm the only person that doesn't know about it. So I just went about learning and not really teaching anything of it, because in my head it was like, everyone else knows all of this and I don't. I'm playing catch-ups. And it's interesting, like, getting to 7 years in the industry, 10 years in the industry, 12 years in the industry, and even though now I'm 14, it's like I fucking know nothing. Like, that was the reality of it. And I started to get more formal learning, probably in this space, probably at the start of last year, really. So it's like I had bits and pieces and I'd done some weekend things here and there. I had information and I could use parts of it sometimes, but I didn't see the whole picture. And it wasn't until, so I went and saw a lady called Alice Hemmerley, and I know she's worked with a lot of other people in the industry. I only did a little bit of work with her. She didn't really fit my mold, but I can see how she fits other people's. And then from there, later in the year, I went to the coaching room, which they did a lot of their stuff out of Sydney. So, and since then I've done, they do a lot of NLP work. That's predominantly theirs, which is metaprogramming. So in what I teach, it's a little bit of NLP, but that's just a part of the whole thing. So, and NLP is effectively the teaching of subjective reality, if you want to think of it like that. So it's like you and I will view something, and based on your map, you'll make it make sense to you, and I'll make it make sense to me. And if we're not aware of that difference, I will say that makes me feel X. And when I say that makes me feel X, you then bring up your emotion that you attach to the word X, right?
Yeah,
not the exact same emotion that I have.
Yeah.
So when I'm like, does that shoulder, like, is it grindy? Is it this? I'm looking for you to make, like, you mean grindy, and I say grindy, and I'm like, oh, it's the exact same feeling, but it may not be.
Yeah, I getcha.
So it's subjective experience, effectively, really, not subjective reality. It's more the subjective experience. So your experience is subjective, and my experience is subjective, and neither one is correct. And so when we move into the understanding that none of it's correct, but we're able to learn how to understand you better, and in order to understand you better, I have to actually understand me better, right? And that's scary. That's not fun. So after working with Alice, I went and did a heap of my own stuff. So that's where I came across things like King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which was probably my first real influence through Jungian psychology, and then a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff. To Be a Man by Robert Masters. That's another book that'll pull you apart. So a lot of that stuff, a lot with the coaching room. And so my coach is one of the owners of the coaching room. So I catch up with him every 3 weeks or whatever for an hour, and then literally just continually pulling all these archetypes, the Enneagram, the spirals, so all that sort of stuff, and it's taken bits of information now and applied it into knowledge as a whole. And so listening to people, they'll tell you where their blind spots are and they won't even know it. And so that's kind of where it all sort of came from. And it's like, right, well, like we can go out and continue to teaching people to squat and deadlift and do this, and I think that that's important. I do, especially from a functional sense. Why is that person wanting to do that? The person wants to do a figure model comp. I should just support them. It's like, well, maybe, or maybe what are they avoiding, right? Like that's reality. It's like some people, and I've known people to do this, and it's not every single person, and it's not just figure modeling comps. I don't pick on that part of the industry. I have friends that do that really well, and that's their passion. They love it, right? They read the fine print when they signed. But the thing is that marathon, figure model comp, CrossFit, doesn't matter what it is, where people will do that because that's easier. Going through all that shit is easier than facing the demon that they have sitting at home. And so they'll actually distract themselves with something long term and call it positive and do that, but realistically they're actually avoiding something that's going to show up in about 3-4 years. So how do you have that conversation? That's the question.
Yeah, fuck.
So that's kind of where it comes down to. It's like not just a matter of going, how do we get stronger? It's like, how much is stronger? How many trainers are out there projecting, just vomiting their insecurities onto their clients and calling them goals?
That's where you look at the camera. Yeah, fuck.
So, and what's to say that in 5 years' time I look at what I'm talking about now and fucking go, oh, I just pulled that apart, Isn't that how it's meant to be? Isn't that called growth? So, first I had to admit how much I knew nothing. Then I learned everything, and then now I know nothing. So it's just this bell curve. So so it all sort of pulled apart, and it's sort of been sped up more so the last 12 to 18 months as information started to come together as knowledge. And this is just the beginning.